It's hard to believe, but Trump has already got the country back on track, it seems. Looks like there's a lot of winning going on. And guess what? I am optimistic. You know what? It's kind of a strange feeling. Things have been going in such the wrong direction for so long that now that they're going potentially in the right direction, it's frankly, it's a little weird. And I'm very happy for it. So let's talk about what's possible. As you may or may not know, I serve on the board of the FLCCC, incredible group of people have been working all through COVID and then afterwards to help make America healthy again, right? Evidence-based medicine, talking about simple things like vitamin D, but we're part of that movement now to go from sick care to, well, wellness and reason and common sense and all of that. That's what's possible now with RFK Jr. coming into the mix. Listen, it doesn't have to be this way. It just doesn't. So that's amazing. By the way, what I pointed out in my piece from Friday, just a few days ago, if you look for that, about Trump and his 10-point plan for rescuing America, a big part of that was dismantling this inward-looking, totally inappropriate, illegal, unconstitutional censorship industrial complex that has been this big public-private partnership, right, with various government agencies and so-called NGOs and billionaires and social media companies all conspiring to spy on Americans. Why? I don't know, just because it's something they do. Now, here's something I'm super excited about. We have the chance to finally redo our energy infrastructure in this country. I am really excited about that. In fact, I'll spend a little more time on that because if you don't know, this is a possibility. That would be what's called a small modular nuclear plant. This is brand new designs, not the 1960s style things you read about from the China Syndrome, 3 Mile Island, Fukushima. Those are old GE 1960 style plants. Now, guess what? Like a car, would you want to get in a head-on collision in a 1960 Corvair, if you even know what that is, versus a 2024 Toyota Highlander? Of course not. They're a lot better now in terms of crash protection and all of that. So that little thing right there could actually power basically a small city. It's just astonishing what is possible. So that's now on the table. And of course, we're going to rebuild trust, that we could trust again that the government is not our enemy and we're not its enemy. It's not an adversarial relationship. It's not, the government administrating and then you just get all tangled up in the administrative rules. Listen, as a business person, I have had to struggle with this over and over again. Listen, no business person likes the rules and regulations but a lot of them are just nonsense, right? They don't make anybody's lives better. They're just rules that exist for the sake of rules. A lot of people have administrative jobs simply so they can administer the rules that just got put in place. And the rules don't do anything. It's just that, listen, time out. Time to get back to common sense. Can we just do stuff that actually improves our lives and get rid of the rest? And by the way, all that sick care stuff, everything that's been going on that side exposes one whole giant chunk of my culture as literally being indistinguishable from those belonging to what we would call a death cult. Given the choice between choosing something that's life-affirming and good or choosing something awful that causes death, they invariably go to that one. Quick example. We had some really solid data around March of 2020 that nobody with sufficient levels of vitamin D were showing up in ICUs from COVID. People with insufficient levels, and particularly people who had totally insufficient levels, let's say below 20 nanograms per ml in the blood, were overwhelmingly populating both the ICU and the death charts. Straight line, beautiful charts, more vitamin D in your blood, the less chance you had of going to the ICU. Okay, so we knew that in March of 2020. How many times, compared to pushing ventilators, which killed people, compared to pushing remdesivir, which killed people, compared to doing things that didn't work, which killed people, how many times did you see those things pushed by Fauci, by Walensky, by your hospital administrators, by the late night talk show hosts? I don't know what's wrong with these folks, but they invariably, either they're like the worst people at understanding how stuff works, or actually they kind of liked that outcome. They, for whatever reason, call it a death cult. It's easy to understand that way. On the other hand, there are all these people out there who are like, maybe we should just get vitamin D into everybody's bodies. And that would be the correct way to go. We have not yet had a single national policy around that. I think that's something that we could easily do that would fix a lot of things. And that would go a long way towards beginning to repair the trust in the system. So I care passionately about that side of things, but actually I care even more passionately about something, if that's possible, which is the energy situation and the energy strategy of this country. Now, what's interesting is Kennedy's organization, RFK Jr.'s organization, set up a website where people could nominate people for particular positions because they were looking to fill about 7,000 appointed positions. And the nominator, I got nominated for something, which is around energy and infrastructure. And you can see there were 700 upvotes at the time I took this and a lot of beautiful comments. Thank you for everybody who voted and commented. I'm really humbled and grateful. I think I would make a really good energy secretary. I really would. So let me just step through that and show you an example of how this really ought to be approached. And whether it's me or it's somebody else, I really hope this is how it gets done. So let's start here. What are my qualifications? Well, I wrote this book called The Crash Course, and it's a video series, and it combines, if you see in the little red above the Wiley thing, you have to look at our overall situation from a systems standpoint. Now that includes looking at the economy and energy and the environment all as one thing with a subcomponent. So you can't separate them. You can't just say, well, we'd like to have more economy without also understanding you're going to have more energy and you're going to have more impacts on the environment. You can't preserve the environment without understanding, well, you're going to be impacting the economy and all that other stuff, right? So everything connects to everything else. Leonardo da Vinci said that. Learn how to see. Everything connects to everything else. So I've explored this. I've been working on this. I have about 20 years in the field. I understand how these things come together. But listen, if you just understand this one chart, you would understand my entire energy strategy. So that's electricity up the y-axis there per capita or per person. And you have GDP across the bottom there. And again, per person. So it's on a equal basis. And you see all the different countries on there with the size of the bubble being, I believe that would be the size of their overall population. And what you see there circled in red is that there is no such thing as a low energy rich country. Now, this is electricity, but this is universally true. Energy is the master resource, not a resource. You know, you got copper, you got cotton, you got oil, you got silver. Back up, Bucky. If you don't have the oil, you can't have those other things. It is the master resource. It's the lifeblood of everything. And electricity is a really potent form of easily consumed power that's out there. Now, how do you get your electricity, right? Well, you could burn fossil fuels, but that's a mistake. We need those for other things. You could make that electricity out of wind and solar. Well, a little, but it would be a total mistake. Rookie error to try and make those the center stage of your actual energy policy because, well, they're intermittent. I think they have a role, but everybody who's been thinking wind and solar somehow can take center stage. It's like, no, you don't understand. This is a bit part in a very large play. Those things have a side role. Maybe they could get to a center role, and I'll show you how we could do that. But this is the most important thing. We don't seem to understand this at the national policy level yet. There is no such thing as a low energy rich country. So how would we go about fixing that? Well, first up, we don't have a strategy. We do not have a national energy strategy. If we do, I couldn't find it. It's not a public document. So when you go to the White House, you find that their energy strategy is to have 100% clean electricity, whatever that means, by 2035. Okay, that's a goal. It's not a strategy. Okay, so let's start here. What is a strategy? I did a lot of this work in my corporate world. I run strategies for my own business now. In my board positions, I will always bring the strategic element because here's a strategy. A strategy, whether you have one for your personal life or you're doing it for your family or a big corporation, it's the same thing. It's where are we going and how are we going to get there? What's the vision and what are the resources? Kind of always easy to come up with big fancy visions. We're going to be interstellar. Yeah, but the resources, right? How are you going to get there? So a good strategy is a compelling, crisp, achievable future state you want to be in that people can see and imagine themselves into that can be achieved with the resources that you kind of have on hand. So those are the two elements. A strategy is not a goal. 100% clean energy by 2035 is not a strategy. It's it's one part of a goal that sits out here, but how are you going to get there? For a good comprehensive strategy, you got to have somebody who knows how to put all those parts together, begin to pull them all in, get the right stakeholders, and discuss this. So let me take you through that and show you what it might look like. And by the way, when you type in U.S. Energy Information Agency, EIA, administration, energy strategy into Google and say, tell me what we got. Here are your top 3 hits. First, the energy facts explained, so not a strategy. Then you get the energy outlook, which explores long-term energy trends, aka rear view mirror kind of stuff. And so that's not a strategy. And then we have February that say the short-term energy outlook, which is where they forecast where things are going to go. But again, not a comprehensive strategy. So if I was energy secretary, I would propose to develop a strategy that actually aligns the resources we have with the place we want to go to assure that the U.S. has the lowest electricity price of any developed country. That would be a starting point because there's things we could do there. Now, why that? Listen, the oil and gas just is already coming out of the ground. I happen to be an oil and gas investor, both at the individual well level and at larger company levels. Okay, I believe in oil and gas, so I'm not absolutely 100%. However, we don't use any oil and gas really, unless we're Puerto Rico or Hawaii, to make electricity. We might use any oil. Natural gas, sure, we use that in peaker plants, but we shouldn't be using our natural gas to make electricity. It's the lowest rung use for that. Why? Because there are other things we could do. Okay? Lots of things we could do so that we don't need to burn the gas for electricity. We can use it for other things because a molecule of methane, a carbon with 4 hydrogens, is this extraordinary device. You can do all kinds of things with it. It's kind of like the easiest, cheapest thing you could do is burn it. Oxidize it so that you can make some electricity. We should be using that to fuel compressed cars, LNG cars. We can be exporting it if we want to decide we want to do that. We can turn it into feedstock for all kinds of chemical processes. We can make nitrogen-based fertilizers out of it, which we're going to have to talk about that in a future episode. Absolutely, these are all important, vital things to do. Are you tired of feeling run down, maybe low energy? You know you've got some pounds you'd like to lose. Maybe you've got brain fog or something like that. Listen, we think we have the answer to all of that, and it begins with your food. If you're like me, you were shocked to hear testimony recently that unraveled and unearthed and exposed the idea that our food has been made addictive by addiction specialist scientists, the tobacco scientists out there putting things in our food. Maybe it also shocked you to discover that Europe does not allow all kinds of stuff in our food because they know it's toxic. What is the combined effect of all of this? Listen, we know what the data is. It's horrifying. The number of children showing up with type 2 diabetes, the total metabolic disasters unfolding across the land, marked by obesity, sure, but we have cardiovascular issues, concomitant rises in cancers, all of these things, and it all starts with food. Garbage in, garbage out. So what do we do about that? First, it begins with understanding the context. We've put together a very exciting, comprehensive food webinar that will expose the regulatory side of this and what is being done and why and how this happened to us. We'll be talking with Thomas Massey about that. We've got Dr. Ken Berry talking with us on the practitioner side and the solution side. We've got Tracy Thurman talking to us about the war on farmers and the war on food that has been happening. And Robert Barnes to help us understand that as well. Many, many other guests to both define what the problem is and what we can do about it. And we want to make it as simple as possible. Here's an example. Tortillas. Hey, maybe you're even on keto and these are carb-wise. So these have low amounts of carbs. See that? Carb-wise. Yeah, these are carb-wise, so keto-friendly. I want to note something. You see how fresh these look? Yeah, you see any mold in there? Any bacteria, any yeast, any sign of anything, any organism in there? These things expired in June and it is now November. So, what are they putting in our food that even black mold won't eat it? I don't know. But I've decided that if it's not good enough for black mold, it's no longer good enough for me. Once you start down that path, you realize that we have got sugar and preservatives and salt and seed oils, all of the chemicals that are unnecessary, and the fact that the food pyramid is absolutely wrong. So if you like effective information that leads to effective action, this webinar is for you. It's going to be the usual thing that my team and I will put on. It'll be organized, digestible, easily understandable, and most importantly, it's going to be actionable in ways that you will understand what to do. And I've designed it so that you would easily be able to send this to anybody that you love or care about, say, can we talk about this, and have it as a starting point for conversation. But what we really want, we want you to be healthy because, well, who doesn't want to be healthy? Health is the number one form of personal capital you can have, of course. But given everything that's going on in the world, being healthy and vigorous and active are going to be dominant strategies and things you're really going to want to be carrying in. So, folks, it's time to get prepared on all levels. It begins here. It starts at home. It begins with our eating. And let's just make sure that we're not eating stuff that even black mold won't touch. With that, thank you very much for listening, and we'll get back to our regular programming now. Bye-bye. So, how would we begin to develop this? Okay, I'll just give you 4 points of my 10-point strategy plan, right? First thing I would do, first thing is you got to start talking about how you're going to build this diverse energy portfolio. At the top of my list is nuclear energy, in particular, small modular nuclear reactors, in double particular, especially thorium reactors. I've done many shows on that. I won't go into it far here, but for anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, you got your uranium fuel cycle, typically around the U-235 uranium. But then there's this other fuel cycle you can use. It has a different sort of a pathway. You're still fissioning things, you're still breaking atoms apart, right? It's still a nuclear fission reaction, not fusion. And with that, you're using the thorium-233, U-233 cycle. Great. Here's the thing. When we use the uranium-235 cycle, it creates a lot of waste. It burns about 0.5% of the mass gets turned into energy. Kind of cool. Not as cool as the thorium cycle, where about 99.5% of the material gets consumed to make energy, leaving a very tiny amount left over for waste. And also those waste products happen to have a much way shorter half-life. So there's a vastly lesser amount of nuclear waste. But imagine this. Imagine you had something about the size of a 40-foot shipping container. You live in a small town. Let's say you have, not even a small town. Let's say you live in a region with, say, 20,000 homes in it. You could provide electricity for all 20,000 of those homes out of one of these small modular reactors. And its fuel, when it's fully fueled up, would last about 50 years on the thorium cycle. Now, pie in the sky, future tense? No. The United States built the first working thorium fuel cycle reactors at Oak Ridge, 1958. We did it. Then we abandoned it for reasons. China decided to come over to our national archives, copy the plans, take them home, and now they have operating thorium reactors. It's the wave of the future. This is a matter of national security, but beyond that, imagine having reliable, low-cost, long-term energy for your community. That's my vision for this. Once we have those, I don't know what your community is going to do. You guys might decide to do raku pottery. Our community might decide that we're going to use that electricity to open arc welding shops. I don't know. People do crazy things, genius, human, beautiful inventiveness. Energy is the starting block for that. With energy, everything else becomes possible. So, and then, we'll use some advanced biofuels and hydrogen. Sure, there could be some good places for that, and expand renewable energy. We should invest in wind and solar, of course, keep that going when and where appropriate. Doesn't make sense in all places. More hydro, especially micro hydro. We ought to just be like removing the red tape, providing support so that somebody like me who happens to have a small river out back, somebody would show up hopefully from the government and say, hey, let's do this together. Let's get this done. Let's get micro hydro. So distributed electricity grid. Little pieces all over the place where we've got a mix of things so that we will be much more insulated from potential cyber attacks, coronal mass ejections, you name it. More robust, cleaner, cheaper, all of that. This is all doable. But we needed to have this breath of fresh air where it was finally okay to talk about things that actually make sense rather than being in the grips of these death cultists who are like, oh no, you couldn't possibly develop those. Oh, well, you're going to say, oh no, Chris, oh, didn't you see October 16th? Now they announce it. Biden-Harris administration announces October 16th, $900 million, which by the way is missing a zero, to build and deploy next generation nuclear technologies. Too little, too late, and also for the wrong reasons. Want to know why? Because it was in September, a month prior to that, that the Energy Secretary Granholm, who's done a terrible job at this, just horrible, went on CNBC and said that, yeah, you know what, we might want to consider small modular reactors. You know, it's a full-on go for the future. Why? Because of data centers and growth in generative AI. That's why she said, you see it right there? It's right there in the second paragraph down. Yeah, when you and I needed and wanted and deserved stable, low-cost electricity, they're like, oh no, that's hard. We couldn't get anywhere with this story at all. Oh no. But as soon as a data center needs it, well, let's fast track that, because that's how the death cult works, right? If it's for people and it's for making your lives better, that's hard. That's going to be so hard. Oh, it's for a data center to help track you so we can have our censorship industrial complex really get supercharged. That's going to be easy, right? That's how it's been for too long. It is time to end that. We're going to make power of, by, and for the people so that you and I and our children and our grandchildren can finally have cheap, reliable power, which we deserve. Okay? And it's time to invest in ourselves. I would also propose we got an infrastructure modernization. Let's do this. Let's stop sending tons of money to foreign countries so they can kill other people in other countries. Stop it, okay? That's over. All you guys and gals in the military-industrial complex, it's time to figure out how to make, maybe you should figure out how to build resilient power grids. Or maybe you could work on transmission upgrades. Instead of making fancy little things that blow up halfway around the world, maybe you could make pylons and electrical lines. And we need energy storage solutions. We need a new type of a battery. We should invest in this. Maybe they're capacitors. Who knows? We're going to have to unleash the inventiveness of mankind in everything we possibly can do to lean into energy storage solutions. That's going to be amazing. Could be large scale battery storage, could be smaller scale, could be pumped hydro, could be thermal storage. There's all kinds of ways. And guess what? It's going to be a mix of things that are going to make sense depending on where you live, the use case, the size of the building, all kinds of things. But that's what we should be going for. And we should be going after the ultra low-hanging fruit. Part 3 of my plan would be energy efficiency and conservation. Okay? Building standards. What's the building standard? Insulate, insulate, insulate. That's it. All new construction. We go forward with just extra insulation. And I don't know how that gets done. You know, is that a mandate? Is that a subsidy? Is that an encouragement? But if we do this, we are a much more robust nation. You would, like in your house, if your house is insulated to R40, 60 walls and ceiling, and you live in a cold environment, right? You're not down in Florida somewhere, I guess, or in a really super temperate place, like maybe Georgia. But up here where I live in New England, R40, 60, if you can have that, your heating and cooling loads shrink. A watt that you don't have to produce, a watt saved, is more than a watt earned. If we don't have to put in hundreds of gigawatts of new power because we have rational homes that are easy, cleaner, easier, better to live in, healthier environments, then we should do that. That's easy. And we should retrofit where it makes sense. Not every building it makes sense, but some, you want to retrofit. Makes sense. Transportation infrastructure, we electrify a lot. Maybe we get electrified trains back. Maybe we get electrified trolleys in the cities back. Electrification is clearly part of the future, and also industrial efficiency, right? These are all things you want to sort of look at and help people make sense of. But here's an example. Let me make this simple. Solar hot water is a no-brainer. It's the vitamin D of energy, okay? 25% of all residential energy use goes into hot water. You can basically meet all of that with a circulating pump that burns with about as much energy intensity as a 100-watt light bulb, back when we had such things, that only has to operate for a few hours a day to circulate the heat off of the roof into your hot water tank. There are countries that have close to 100% use of this on their rooftops. Israel does this, China does it. You know why? Because it makes sense. You use the sun to heat stuff. It's like nothing fancy. Like, oh, the sun doesn't have to come down and its photons get turned into electrons. It's very complicated. And you have inverters. This is a box that's painted black with some tubes in it and some circulating fluid. That's it. This is a no-brainer. The return on investment on this stuff is extraordinary. It's amazing. And we should use common sense. I would propose that we run the Department of Energy like a business. First, we run the strategy. Second, we establish a return on energy invested as a vital planning input, okay? What is EROEI? The amount of energy you get back from something versus the amount of energy you put into something. So if you were a farmer and you didn't have cows and tractors or steer or oxen or horses, you would want to know that for every calorie of energy you expended planting food, you would get more than 1 calorie of food back on the back end of that. Because if you didn't, you'd starve. So your energy return on energy invested, the higher that is, the more you can do as a nation, as a society, as a person, if you have a high return on that investment. But you don't think about, it's not a dollar investment, it's energy invested versus energy returned. It's a really important, vital thing. Hundreds of decisions are being made without this input. So let's imagine you've just secured a position at housing and urban development. I'm sorry, we've sentenced you to that. But let's say HUD suddenly has to make a decision, right? All these buildings we have, all this Section 8 housing, we got $1 billion to spend. So do we insulate them? Do we put new windows in? Should we replace the boiler in the basement? Should we put these solar thermal hot water things on the roof? Well, they're operating blind because they don't know what the energy return on energy investment of those 4 options would be and how to compare them. Now, there may be other political considerations. I don't know, but a minimum, every planning decision ought to have the economic return, the energy return, as well as other considerations as part of that cycle, because that's what an intelligent human would do. It would just be part of it. So I would establish an EROI as a whole thing that would be understood. It's kind of a complicated thing. It takes a lot of work. It would take a while to resolve it, but it could get done. Next, I would also manage the inventory just like a business. Like, hey, how much coal do we have? How much gas? How much oil? Right? How much uranium? What are our strategic stockpiles of things? What does our energy infrastructure need for our long-term, 5, 10, 20, 50-year energy strategy? How do we make sure we have those on hand so that we can do what we say we need to do? It's just running it like a business. Absolutely needs to be done. And also garbage in, garbage out. I would fix that because we need to bring immediate clarity to our nation's most vital energy statistics so we can make better decisions and we can make sense of things again. Okay? We've got some really muddy statistics in there and they're no good. No better, no worse than what we have for the BLS doing their jobs reports, which are terrible. Our inflation statistics are all like, just a giant mess. COVID statistics were complete garbage. We have some problems here too in the energy space. So I would propose to fix those. Okay. And what do we mean by energy return and energy invested? Let's flesh this concept out a tiny bit because this is critical. So this is kind of an interesting chart. Let me talk you through it. In fact, this chart kind of explains how the world works. Okay. So we could use this we'll talk about oil in this particular example here because it's kind of easy to understand. So you'll notice on the x-axis, it starts out at 50 way over there and progresses all the way through to 0. And you'll notice on the y-axis, it starts at 0% and goes all the way up to 100%. So let's ask and answer the question. We're all the way over there at 50. We use 1 barrel of oil to drill a well, say, and we get 50 barrels back. So that's what the 50 would represent. Well, we used 1 unit to get 50 units, okay? Well, 1 divided by 50 is the same as 2 divided by 100. That's 2 into 100, it's 98%. So you can see here, let me get my little lasery pointer thing out. This crosses out at 98% here. So when you get 50 units of energy back for 1 energy unit in, you have a 98% return. Well, notice here at 40, we go all the way here to 40. Notice it hasn't really fallen off all that much, right? Because now we're at 40 and instead of 50. So we're basically at 96%. You see the shape of this chart is not, intuitively you might think it goes like this, woo, straight to zero. It doesn't. It goes like this, and then it falls off this energy cliff here, and here it crosses not at zero, but at 1, because when you use 1 barrel of energy to get 1 barrel of energy, you have a 0% return. There's no return. Like I spend $1, I earned $1, 0. That's a 0 return. It's a goose egg. That's why at the 0 mark here, this crosses at what you can see, if you could squint at this carefully, at the position of 1. Now, here's why this is so important. First off, everything you and I do, we live over here in the green part. We're so glad that there are people out there working in the oil and gas, nuclear, other spaces where they're making energy. And fortunately, they do it in a way where we get more energy back from the energy we put into it. So there's green, there's surplus energy, because this whole green part represents your job, my job, food in the store, airplane flights, everything you see when you go out into the world and you see energy happening. This is what happens because of the green part. So we have to be aware of this energy return on energy invested. And here's why. Way back in the 1930s, when we were first getting oil out, it's off this chart. That chart only goes to 50. Mentally take it twice as far. And back in the 30s, we would have about 100 to 1 returns on our oil finds. Why? Because the oil was kind of close to the surface and it was right there and it was onshore. It was kind of easy. You could have a wooden derrick if you needed to and just sort of like pound your way into the ground and get those gushers coming out of the ground, right? A bubble and crude came out of the ground, right? So 100 to 1 back then. And then by the 70s, we were probably in the 25 to 1 zone, but nobody's really noticing. Because if you noticed the amount of green under 100 to 1 or 50 to 1 and 25 to 1, it's kind of the same. Nobody really notices. In the 1990s, I think, estimates range from 18 to 1 to 10 to 1, somewhere in that zone. Okay, fine. Still a lot of green. The problems start to kick in if we have oil that starts to fall down into the 3 to 1 range. Right? Now we have trouble. So this might be things like tar sands and particularly the oil shales and any other things we might be thinking about going at. They just don't have the same vitality. They don't have the same energy return as oil of old. That's fine. But when you're living in this world where you live in a world of 3 to 1 oil, there's a lot less green. And you know what that missing green represents? Easy lifestyles, living standards, lots of different job classifications. Things that were easy in this world are a lot harder in this world. And oh, hey, what if we tried to live on corn-based ethanol, which has an energy return of 1.4 to 1 here in the U.S.? We're trying to like if we just had to live on corn-based ethanol. This is the world we live in. By the way, this is Mad Max. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Like from an energy return on energy invested standpoint, corn-based ethanol is a complete dog. It doesn't hunt. And we should have that conversation. People might still say, Chris, politically, the farmers in Iowa, it's just so important. We got to keep doing it anyway. That's fine. That's a political decision. But I'm telling you from an energy decision, this is stupid. And it should be part of the conversation, right? The political considerations should be much more compelling in order to override the stupid part of the story, right? And this would be the kind of thinking and rigor that I believe has to be part of the national conversation around this. So that's sort of my approach towards what we would be doing if I somehow was energy secretary or working directly for the energy secretary and could work on developing a strategy, an energy strategy for this country. That's the kind of optimism I have now, that you could even think these things like, oh, is there room for common sense and good thinking to finally be at the table again? Because it was forbidden for a long time. Forbidden. So I hope you could support my candidacy, such as it is, for energy secretary. But I'm throwing my hat in the ring. I want to help. I want to do what I can to help. That's what got inspired. So with that, I am going to carry on now with my subscribers back at Peak Prosperity, and we're going to be talking about how, the good news keeps rolling in. There's some other awesome things to discuss.